All right, let's bring up some foreign politics, and of course, we'll also be striking to see how it reverberates across the world, and that's talking about Russia's election. As the Electoral Commission, of course, has formally registered President Vladimir Putin as candidate for the March 2024 presidential election. Well, the 71-year-old is coming, or he's running as an independent candidate, but he still retains tight control over Russia's political system, which he has established this during his 24 years in power. The Central Election Commission says it had registered Mr. Putin, who nominated himself, as well as right-wing firebrand and Putin loyalist Leonid Solsky as candidates for the vote. Well, the election is expected to hold for 3 days from March the 15th to the 17th, a move that Kremlin critics have argued makes guaranteeing transparency more difficult. And joining us now via Zoom from Belgium is Global Affairs Analyst Colin Zaweke. Good to see you again. Welcome to TVC Breakfast. Tell us what your thoughts are about this move by Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, Kemi, for having me. Very good morning to you and the viewers. I don't believe anyone is actually surprised that Putin is coming up again after 24 years to, contest for the presidency of Russia, which is another 6 years. The reason it wouldn't surprise anyone is because a couple of years ago, he actually tweaked the constitution to allow this to happen, to allow him to run for, 2 more 6-year terms. So which means that potentially the world has got to contend with a Putin presidency till minimum 2036 if he doesn't, tweak the constitution one more time. So that is it. But ordinarily, keeping the cynicism aside, Kemi, ordinarily, when a country is at war, as Russia, currently is with Ukraine, it is a usual practice to expect that for reasons of, continuity and predictability, that, the president continues even without holding an election. So that alone is, a good reason. However, Russia's, case is completely different. I mean, one cannot justify his candidacy on the basis of the war in Russia because there have been other autocratic elements playing in the background.
So, Collins, now, is there a concern from your end as to the fact that Putin seems to have shut down opposition? Of course, looking at the arrested Nikolai, and of course the fact that Nadezhnin is another candidate who has openly advocated for an end to the war, and we have seen countless times that Putin openly have ensured that opposition figures are out of the game. Is there a concern for you there?
Well, I think there are very, very serious reasons to be concerned about developments in Russia. Because come to think of it, Theophilus, Russia is supposed to be, a democracy. There are elements in its political system that points to Russia actually having all that, democratic, countries across the world has. However, the perception of autocracy is actually fueled by, part of the example that you have cited, which is, restrictions in political participation. Now, there are also other elements. For instance, media control, which means that there isn't very much, free press. But we also have issues like political influence. All of these actually play together to dampen the democratic elements, the democratic foundation on which the Russian constitution was actually built. And so a whole lot of power, is concentrated around a single individual, which is Vladimir Putin. Now, give the country to a different leader than Vladimir Putin, Russia's democracy will certainly be unquestionable. But here we are, that is the reality.
Okay. And talking about the reality, so this time around it appears different. Yes, you have rightly pointed out that Vladimir Putin had, tweaked with or tinkered with the constitution, to enable him run again and again. But this time around, with the lingering war and the effects on the economy, even though we are seeing a lone opposition figure talking about his moves if he is made president to stop the war, do you think that, when this gets to the power of the electorate, they might just have a say as to, they might determine the fate of Vladimir Putin, especially in the way he's going on in the war? Because many are saying, or a crop of, Russians are saying that it remains a bad idea and it's a colossal failure.
The outcome of the election, Kemi, is predictable. And that is the fact that Vladimir Putin is winning another 6-year term. It has already been written in the stars, And Putin has actually helped to do that. He has done that in several ways. For instance, the reign of terror, ensuring that, opposition is well as much as possible, and that there is a very, very serious fear out there, even with the electorate. So, if you go out to the streets of Moscow and, speak with people, you will come out with a very strong perception of, absolute support for Vladimir Putin. As at the last count, it was, recorded that about 80% of people are ready to vote Vladimir Putin back into office. So the war may be, unpopular amongst a very tiny minority of Russians. Don't forget that one of the instruments that autocrats use is, propaganda. So the propaganda machine of Putin has actually been doing over time in the last several months, going back to actually years, making sure that they sell to the people what they want the people to hear. And so what the vast majority of Russians actually know is the fact that the war is justified and that, Putin is doing the right thing, and that as of this moment, he is the Messiah that God has sent down from heaven to, build for them a beautiful Russia. And I don't think an election is going to change that.
Right. And so that propaganda that you talked about, part of which is the ban on independent media to cover the elections. What do you think the world will think about all of this?
Well, for a start, Putin is not losing sleep about what the world thinks about, Russia or about himself. He is concerned only about himself and, his power. Now, to be honest with you, one question you will ask yourself is, if you have a way of measuring the genuine feelings of Russians, and if indeed what we hear and, read in the media is correct, and which is that Russians are absolutely comfortable with Putin, and that they are absolutely, happy with their lives, well then, there is nothing to worry about in terms of, the Russians themselves, because the essence of politics, the essence of democracy is that, people are happy and so on and so forth. So if that is the case, well, that works for Russia. It may not work elsewhere. American democracy has its own, ups and downs as well. Nigeria has its, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, the world will continue to see Russia as, autocratic nation under Putin. And, we wouldn't know if that perception will change until Putin leaves office. And
especially now that the Russian nation under Putin is also increasingly wooing Africa, at least, some countries in Africa, and they are even embracing this, friendship that we see budding between Russia and Africa. Of course, America is also observing this and is also on a drive to intensify its investment in Africa, especially West Africa. But what are your thoughts as to where this, this Russian presidency, extended Putin presidency, what it could mean for Africa and, I dare say, Nigeria?
Well, it was nice you raised this, Kemi, because the battle for Africa, for want of a better phrase to use, has never been more intense than it has been in the past, several years. The fight for influence, of course, includes countries like Russia, to stick with the example that you cited. But of course, we can't forget China. We can't forget even Turkey as well. But bringing it back to Russia, because it actually has, a lot more influence in the very, very bad areas of supporting, rogue regimes, arming them with the Wagner, mercenaries and all of that. So what he does is actually trying to replace the colonialism that, Africans, the shackles, the remnants of colonialism that a number of African countries are running away from, to replace it with, Russia's own brand of, colonialism. Now, no matter how much he tries to couch it as building a partnership of equals, where he, his intention is, or his eyes, his main interest is on the commodities coming out of Africa, the natural resources, and so on and so forth. At least the way he has been different from others by being a bit more upfront about the fact that, yes, Russia has interests, it has its eyes on the natural resources in Africa, but in return, he's going to, put something back in terms of supporting their economy and so on and so forth. So, should Africa turn a blind eye to Putin? Certainly not. But Africa just simply needs to identify the value that Russia adds to its table, to its economy, and then build a relationship around that so that it's not defined only by Russia's interest. And that is where Nigeria comes in. Nigeria has got to be smart about this in terms of, finding out and establishing the value that Russia brings to the table, give them a space. China, give them a space if you identify the interest, and then United States of America, exactly the same. So there is space for everybody to play in the African field as long as Africa is able to identify its interests and pursue it with each and every of these countries angling for influence.
So I can't help but think now that what should be, or what do you think will be the fate of Putin or even Russia if he was to lose the election?
So this is unthinkable.
What if it happens? I mean, there are other candidates running on an independent platform. So what if it happens?
Indeed, it is a possibility, of course, even if it's just 1% possibility. Well, I think what is going to happen is that, and that is ironical, the perceived 80% support that he currently has, you will, see how much they will be jubilant in the streets of Moscow and other major cities actually celebrating his, exit. The reason they are not doing that now is because they are gripped by fear, number one. Number two, they do not know any alternative. Putin is the only one that tells them what they want to hear, and he is a master in packaging, the propaganda. Once another person happens to, come to the fold and unseats him, the support will, immediately change. But let's not make any mistake about this. Mr. Leonid, the strong contender, is not quite, an epitome of democracy. He is indeed probably worse than, Putin. And that is perhaps the reason that he actually made it to be a strong contender. So, for Russians, it is a long ride under their democratic element, I must emphasize that, but also some touches of autocracy. They can't shade it off, very quickly.
But, this will be the last question, but just quickly tell us your thoughts on this war. Of course, Putin isn't alone. He has, will I say now, many Russians backing him. But where do you see this all going in this new year? The Ukrainian side still has its support from the West and the likes. But, for you, how do you see this all panning out?
Ukraine is not well served by the, apparent, decline in support for it militarily, logistically and otherwise, particularly from the United States of America. Now, it is perhaps part of that, Vladimir Putin's influence, because it is being said that the reason the Republicans in the United States are standing against, the military help that Ukraine needs is because, Trump is actually stopping it from happening. So, the scenario is unimaginable if Ukraine doesn't get the help that they so desperately need. Like we said, or like we heard, sorry, they have enough stock, military stock to last them till about June. If before then, as a matter of fact, if by end of next month, they do not get the support they need, both from the EU and the United States, that spells doom for Ukraine. But if they manage to, get the help that they need, I believe that, the situation will be looking very, very rosy for them, and they stand to at least defend themselves very well and probably win the war.
All right, Colin Tuweke, fabulous conversation as always with you. Thanks a lot for your contributions on this subject. We'll see how it goes, even though you've all but ruled out, it's all narrowing down to a further Putin presidency. Thanks again for telling us more of this dynamics.
My pleasure. Thank you, Kemi, for having me.